He might actually be the most derivative one of all. I mean, Christ, the same house.
Maybe so, but you forgot the first rule of surviving a stab movie. Never answer the...
I'm bored.
Wait!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking the code word is quesadilla or unicorn. We're talking The Woman in White and The Bride in Black. And we're talking Lin Shaye's voice in Lindsay Syme's body. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking you are a miserable, ungrateful bitch.
I mean, truth, yes.
Everyone, we are discussing James Wan's Insidious Chapter 2 in a little early of its 10-year anniversary by months, which, by the way, oof. But also in advance of the release of Part 5, Insidious the Red Door.
Indeed, yeah. And folks, if you have not seen the original Insidious in a while, this is quite literally a direct sequel, so we do encourage checking it out. Or you could watch it with us, because of course we covered Insidious on Patreon.
I was going to ask, did we do a commentary or was it an episode?
It is a commentary.
Okay, cool. That was like early pandemic days when we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Let's find something to watch.
Sure, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I have a lot to say about this movie, and I'm sure we do. And our guests. So why don't we bring in our guests, Joe?
Fantastic.
Everyone, you know them as the titular brothers in Shudder's most watched series, the Boulet Brothers Dragula. They are the hosts of the horror podcast Creatures of the Night. They were members of 2022's Out 100, a list celebrating the world's most influential LGBTQ plus individuals, and they have spent most of 2023 on their world tour, so we are very happy that they were able to stop by and chat with us. Please welcome the Boulet brothers themselves, Dracmorda and Swanthula Boulet.
Hello, horror queers.
Yes, thank you for having us. What an intro, too. That was fabulous.
I loved it.
Happy to help. Also, congratulations on being considered for Emmy noms.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hard at work. Always and forever.
It's all in the day's work, really.
I will say I don't know that I ever imagined that would happen, so I'm humbled by it and I'm excited.
And also, give us the fucking award.
Yes.
Yes, that part too.
Y'all are busy little bees, though. I mean, honestly, I feel like y'all have been all over the place this year, and it's only June. I guess the year's halfway over.
50%, yeah.
But I will say, I mean, we did create our first TV special and aired it this year.
Mm-hmm.
Did that real quick before going on our US and Australian tour, and now we're deep into the next project. So I feel very accomplished this year and tired.
I just don't know why you two aren't busier. That's what
That's true.
I know. And there are a few other like kettles on the stove, boiling in the background too, and the people are like, you are the busiest, craziest people I've ever worked with.
I don't know how y'all sleep. Or do you sleep, actually? You are creatures of the night.
We do sleep.
Upside down on the ceiling for 1 or 2 hours a night.
There you go.
Nice.
There is one other drag queen that works, I would say, as neurotically as us, and that's Trixie Mattel. That's one thing that we have in common. Probably the only thing.
Trace, what was the line from Insidious 2? Like, you ungrateful bitch or something?
You're a miserable, ungrateful bitch.
Trixie Mattel, that's for you. You miserable, ungrateful bitch. Kidding. I love her. I love Trixie. Of course I do.
Right. And also, Trixie, if you are listening, you're welcome to visit and have your own rejoinder.
You heard it here first. But welcome to Insidious Chapter 2. So I take it y'all have seen the first entry in this franchise.
Yes. And we've seen this one too. It's just been a long time, and I forgot how much I love this movie, and I'm pretty sure I liked it better than the first one back in the day.
Ooh,
yeah.
Oh, wait,
words.
Do you still like it better than the first one?
I think I might, actually. Yeah.
Is that a shocker? Because I really enjoyed it too. This was a rewatch for me. I haven't seen it in years, and I'm like, this is good.
It's
like,
so
I really liked
campy.
it. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I like it in a exactly. Like in a prom night 2 kind of way, you know?
Oh.
Okay, I appreciate the comparison, honestly, to Prom Night 2. I think my issue is, and I think this shares a lot of DNA with that first film, obviously, but the first film has a lot of ridiculous elements that I still feel like are very grounded and it treats very seriously, which does make that first movie, I think, one of the scariest movies of the decade of the 2010s. This one doesn't feel very grounded, and it is much sillier.
Are you trying to tell me there's something silly about Spooky Yahtzee? Or
No.
I mean, look, this poor Danielle Basutti, who's playing the woman in white, like she's getting her best Joan Crawford "Mommy Dearest" act on in this movie.
Oh,
and
100%.
It's really fun to watch. It's just, again, when you pair it with that first movie, I'm just like, this doesn't line up for me.
You're right. It's not scary like that. And Swan was tormenting me the whole time. I'd be like, look, it's you. It's you. Every time she would come on the screen.
She was giving Dracmorda energy too. Let's just be honest.
I mean, I feel like that's a compliment because she looks very well done up.
I think so. I was like, oh my God, she's in full drag. Like, I was like, I forgot. And that's what I mean by kind of liking this movie in that way. I appreciate it for those moments. But yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously the first one is definitely scarier and this one is much campier. But I have an appreciation for those things. Kind of like Pearl. I don't know. It's giving me like camp drag.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
And you know what? If this was the first entry in the franchise, I would have no issue with any of these things. And to be clear, I still like this movie. It's just like, I love that. The first one's a 5-star movie for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my issue with the film is that it does suffer by comparison just because it is immediately following it. So it almost begs to be watched right after you watch the first film. And I think it's doing a lot of similar things, which is not a bad thing if you like the first film. But if you're looking for this movie to take the franchise in a new direction, it sometimes feels like it's kind of just aping a lot of the first film. But I will give it credit for acknowledging, hey, we've got this badass cast of ladies that we kind of underutilized in the first film. So it's like, let's give Barbara Hershey more to do. Let's give Rose Byrne more to do. And oops, yeah, we killed off Lin Shaye and we made a mistake, but we still found a way to bring her back.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I thought too.
Which
Because
we
I
loved.
felt like,
Of course we'd love to see. I mean, I remember even then, I was like, I can't believe they got rid of that Elise character because she was so, kind of pivotal to the whole thing. Like the gravitational pull was there. Yeah, exactly. So it was the clever, like acrobatics of the script writing. Although I think it got a little too creative here and there. I was like, wait, now what? Like several times. I was like, pause. We had to talk it through. We had to like bring it back and like talk it through with each other. Now wait, okay, mom is whatever. It's
I almost feel like that
complicated.
was the thing, right? They didn't know that like Lin Shaye's character would be. I'd almost say like they thought it was expendable, and then like, wait a minute, like we have kind of like a star character on our hands.
Right.
How can we lean into this? Which then kind of automatically makes it a little campy, I guess.
Well, but that's the thing is like Lin Shaye does an interview on one of the Blu-rays for this where she's like, yeah, James came to me and he was like, oh, I'm really like having second thoughts about like killing you off in the first movie because I'd love to bring you back. And he's like, wait, this is a ghost movie. I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
The rules are ours to make.
We actually interviewed Lin, and she was I think she was like my favorite interview we've ever done.
Oh God, she just seems like such an absolute joy. Like there's certain people who work in horror where you want nothing but good things for them because, they're a staple of the genre. They've been working forever. Lin Shaye is absolutely one of those people. And how nice to hear that she's actually delightful.
Oh, she is.
So sweet.
And she was in all those crazy like comedy movies before this, like and she talked about that. I was like, have you always been interested in horror? And she's like, not really. Like I did all these like zany comedy movies and silly things, and then it just clicked,
Well, but that's what's really funny. We'll talk about this with this dubbing of that poor actress in the first scene, but it's like you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. She's in that as the teacher, and her voice sounds exactly the same. But yeah, I guess I grew up watching her in Elm Street, and then like she was in the first 2 Critters movies, but then I don't know what she did until There's Something About Mary.
Yeah. There was a couple of like comedy things she did. Yeah, she was telling us it was like a struggle, and her dad was a producer and would try to get her in things, and it was a really interesting story. So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, there's many good things that have come out of this franchise, but one of the best is that we have like this franchise that is led by this. Oh God, what's the right word? It's not elderly. She's not elderly.
Well, how old is she? We could say she's like a septuagenarian or an octogenarian.
I think septuagenarian.
Matriarchal, right?
Yeah,
there we go.
There you go. I like
that.
That's
a much more appropriate, sensitive term. Thank you.
Well, okay. So let's talk about how this kind of came to be, because what I find interesting about this franchise is that this, along with Paranormal Activity, this kind of helped launch Blumhouse as the horror juggernaut it is today. So let's travel back in time to 2011, shall we?
I was going to say.
I want some sound effects, please.
So Blumhouse has done plenty of non-horror stuff, but at the time, their biggest claim to fame was Paranormal Activity, which had opened wide in 2009. We got a sequel a year later in 2010, but they were on the hunt for another franchise, and that's when Insidious came along. And James Wan is what I would also call maybe in a creative rut around this time. Though he had spent many of the years leading up to Insidious executive producing Saws 4, 5, and 6, his last directorial efforts prior to Insidious in 2011 were 2007's 1-2 punch of Dead Silence and Death Sentence, both of which were critical failures and commercial flops.
What was the second one?
Death Sentence. This is the one that's like, it's Kevin Bacon in Death Wish. Like that is what this movie is.
Yeah, the joke just presented itself right to me. You're like, his creative rut with Dead Silence and Death Sentence, which are the adjectives of how everyone reacted to these two projects.
All of the reviews at the time were probably like, Death Sentence is dead on arrival.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, what was the next one? Flop 3? I'm like...
Well, nevertheless, though, so the first Insidious was a big financial success for Blumhouse. Made for $1 million.
Ridiculous.
Right? It had a modest third place opening of $13 million and then legged it out to a $54 million domestic gross and $46 international for a worldwide total of $100 million.
God, can you imagine Jason Blum? He was probably just like throwing money Scrooge McDuck style in a bathroom somewhere, being like, yes, money.
Well, I happened to catch the breakdown of like the budget and the box office success of the second one too, and I think the margin is even more impressive. And I was like, yes, money.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I also did that, and I in my mind I have this image in my head of like, okay, 3 was like kind of successful but not as successful as 2, and then 4 was a big flop. The fourth one made like $100 million overseas.
Really? Is that the one with the key fingers?
Yeah, the key finger.
I think I just decided to forget about that one.
Oh, but it is directed by Adam Robitel, so.
But
okay. Crickets. Okay, moving on.
Dead Silence, Death Sentence 2. Okay.
Flop sweat, yes.
Admittedly, I have not seen 3 and 4 since theaters. I do remember 4 being the weakest one. But listeners, please go listen to our Patreon episode where we discuss the entire franchise, which will be coming out at some point this month.
Yeah, it was earlier this week.
Earlier this week. There you go. So with this, super successful first film, a sequel was inevitable. So Jason Blum insisted on the return of James Wan and Leigh Whannell, the screenwriter. And a treatment of the script did not arrive until nearly a year later. So in February of 2012, they announced that James Wan and Leigh Whannell are in talks for the sequel. Interestingly enough, this is right around the time Wan was beginning pre-production on another little horror film that would become a major franchise, The Conjuring.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I actually have a sneaking suspicion that he was much more focused on The Conjuring than he was on this film, which is maybe why some of these films' weaker elements don't work as well for me, but we can discuss. That film was shot from September to November of 2012, and then Insidious Chapter 2 filming picks up just 2 months later in January of 2013.
Oh my God.
Watching this, like the word conjuring is used in the script somewhere, and like the hairs on the back of my neck went up, and they use the word malignant twice, which I think is just like casting into the future. Yeah, and then we see the red door in the basement, so it's just kind of like like there's like smoke coming out of my ears from all of these references of like things to come.
Are y'all fans of the Conjuring franchise?
Yeah, I enjoy them.
All right.
I can't say all of them, but I remember.
I mean, that's fair. There's so many of them at this point that you can safely say, yeah, I enjoy them, and just not all of them, because you could still be covering at least half of the franchise.
Yeah.
Do the spin-off films they don't have that annoying moniker that's like a Conjuring universe film, does it? Do they?
I don't think so.
I think they do.
Oh, do they?
I don't.
At least a couple of them do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm thinking of like Insurgent, the Divergent saga.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I don't know.
I feel like in this time period it launched like, there weren't like a lot of movies like this out, and then this became successful, and then there was a bunch suddenly, like very kind of, I don't remember them, but there were a lot of like impostery ones, and they did start to get a little confused up to me.
Right. I mean, that's what happens, right? Horror is always cyclical with its popular subgenres.
Yeah.
if it makes a shit ton of money, you're basically sending a message. This is what audiences want, and everybody jumps on that bandwagon.
Yeah. When you said that too, like when you made reference to like all of the Conjurings, I'm like, well, how many were there? So I'm Googling. There's 7, which is unbelievable to me because I think I've probably maybe seen like maybe 3, but all the things that spin off too, like The Nun and La Llorona, and there's more too.
Oh, and we're getting The Nun 2 this year.
Nun 2.
Nun 2.
But it's Akilah Cooper, so we're excited. Tentatively excited.
We had Bonnie on on our show
a lot
ago. Yeah, we were like,
times,
hey, and I was like, oh, you're doing The Nun 2. I thought she had already filmed it. We're like, okay, Bonnie Aaron's from the, she's going to be on The Nun 2. I assumed it was going to come out. And she's like, I haven't filmed the fucking thing yet. I was like, oh.
And that's exactly how she talks.
I
love
imagine
her.
her work is probably like, we're going to fly you over to like Romania or Budapest or something. You'll be there for 5 days. You're going to be in full makeup the whole time. And then we'll fly you home and it'll come out in 6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, fingers crossed it's better than the first one.
I know it's iconic character and
Right?
and she's so iconic. I'm like, come on, how do you mess this up? So I'm hoping it's great.
Apparently with Snoozy Taissa Farmiga. I mean, what? Who said that?
Look, I'm ashamed to admit this. Admittedly, when I saw The Nun in theaters, I drank a lot of wine. And I fell asleep somewhere around the third act.
Oh.
So I truthfully cannot have a whole opinion on The Nun as a movie because I don't think I've actually seen the entire thing. But
that is truly blasphemy in
I
my
know.
book. Pun intended. I cannot fall asleep at a movie. In fact, I hate if I even miss like seconds of the opening. Like I am glued. And like Drac, I'd have to say, can't say the same thing at all.
Ooh, good shade.
You should go to some of the movies that Swan takes me to. You'd be asleep.
I was
too.
gonna say,
blaming me.
wait. Have either one of you walked out of a movie before?
Yes.
Oh, what did we did that not that long ago? Which one was it?
Oh, okay. No, everyone's gonna hate me. I don't even want to say it. Okay. The first time we
You don't
tried
have
to
to say it.
watch,
We can cut it out or we can bleep
I'm
it.
gonna say the first time.
not
Okay,
horror,
the first
right.
time we tried to watch Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh!
We had gotten
goodness.
off of an international flight and we're jet lagged, and I felt like a crazy person.
Yeah.
And as I was watching it, I'm like, is it me or this? Like, I'm like, this is not the right time to watch this movie.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
walked
It wasn't
out.
the movie. It was just not the right time.
It wasn't the right. It was too much, and I was like, "Oh my god, what?" And then the hot dogs, and I was like, "I gotta get out of here!" Like I feel like I'm on acid.
You know what though? So when I went to go see my parents for Thanksgiving last year, I showed that to my whole family. And about halfway through this 2.5-hour movie, my dad looks at me and goes, "Is the next movie going to be easier to understand?"
Papa Thurman, hang in there. Wait until you get to the dildo stuff.
But you know, the Nun, like, okay, a female movie monster. You know, we don't get a lot of those. So and it stuck. Like you saw the Nun referenced in pop culture. So you're like, the branding is great, the imagery is great. Just the movie just needed to be great. You know,
Exactly.
Yeah, I hope they can do something with it because it would be good. I want Bonnie to like blow up like Robert Englund or something. You know?
And that's what Joe was saying. You know, malignant screenwriter Akilah Cooper, also Megan's screenwriter too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's the one that's writing the sequel. And so
Oh,
that
that's
gives us
exciting.
more hope.
Yeah, definitely.
We basically need her brand of madness to like just amp up everything, but also it leads to these tantalizing possibilities where like, well, James Wan is invested in all of these things too, right? So can we somehow get franchise crossover where it's like The Nun versus Megan or something, some kind of wildness there?
So I don't. You can tell me if this is okay to say. So in advance of The Curse of La Llorona, so it had its world premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival, and James Wan appeared. And I got to talk to him for a little bit as he's making his rounds at this cocktail party, and he's talking about, I like to do these spin-offs and shepherd like new like fledgling directors into like horror and they get them in the industry. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
And sometimes it nuns. Wait, what? Who said that?
I feel like he was talking about Annabelle and the Nun. So yes.
Annabelle. Oof.
I don't know. I think I don't know if that's wrong to say, but I feel like letting a queer person do the Nun might be, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like it needs some drama. It needs some like diva
Do you want some
energy,
camp?
right?
Hire a
Yeah.
queer.
Well, and you know what? If they can get a like bombastic performance out of Tessa Farmiga, I am fine with that because I have yet to see that girl raise an eyebrow.
Let's see.
You're so mean to her.
I know. I will stop. Okay. Anyway, so Insidious Chapter 2 is the first time Wan directed a sequel to one of his films, and this is because he's never outright said anything like negative about the Saw sequels, probably because he's produced all of them. But it's like, well, he's kind of like, yeah, I didn't want it to get out of my control that early on. So he was drawn back to the franchise so we could help steer the direction it was going to take. The intent, however, was to have the tone of the sequel be more grounded than the first film.
Oh.
I don't think that happened, but Wan cites his work on filming The Conjuring as an influence as to how he and Winnell approached the production of the sequel. He also wanted to change the subgenre, so where the first movie plays like a classic haunted house film where it's subverted because it's, of course, not the house that's haunted, this one was going to play more like a domestic thriller that just turned into a supernatural thriller.
I can kind of see it, yeah.
The DNA is in there, but I think it gets lost in the sauce because there's some crazy stuff happening.
Yeah, I would never call this film grounded.
Do you think it meant grounded by like trying to tie it up and make it like in his head, or make it make sense and explain things? A lot of times in horror movies they just leave it all to your imagination. Maybe that's what he meant by grounded. It's like, I'm going to actually tell you what's going on and connect all these pieces, and it's going to lead back to the first movie, and like, I don't know, maybe that's what he meant by
they were saying like haunted house and to the first one would be, this one would be like a domestic thriller kind of scenario, which we can get some of that home invasion vibe, and like, maybe there's an enemy and your spouse kind of thing, but it's just too back and forth between like the past and the further and the dream world.
Yeah, if it was centered around Rose Byrne's character, I think we could safely say it, because you're 100% right. It would be like, ooh, I can't trust my husband, he's acting weird, which is very sort of like 90s domestic, ooh, is my husband having an affair, or is he possessed by the devil? Who can say?
Or, surprise, he's possessed by a drag queen.
And I will say, my favorite part of this movie is like, I mean, honestly, it's when Patrick Wilson confronts Carl with the dice and the knife behind his back, and you just have that really creepy image of Patrick Wilson just smiling. I think that's all fantastic, and I wish that would have populated more of this film instead of the Scooby-Doo investigation we have at this hospital.
I agree. We were talking about that earlier today. Yeah, I agree. We thought, I was like, why? I was like, I don't want to like put all this realism on movies, but I'm like,
yeah,
why would they be there? I'm like, that's not why they're not here to solve a puzzle. Like, they're like, she's like, my kid's possessed, my family's, that's what I care about. Like, why are you dragging me on this like caper,
And Lorena's just gone through all of this shit in the first film, like literally the day before, and she's just off with Carl, some guy she hasn't seen in 15 years.
That's true.
Well, I was gonna challenge you, Joe, and you were like, "Oh yeah, you have all these women that are given more to do," and I was like, "Well, Barbara Hershey has more to do in this movie, but Rose Byrne has little more to do than stare at this kitty walker and faint."
It's very scary when it flies up into the air, but it's more, I feel like the first film forgets that she's even a character, so that we can just focus on Patrick Wilson and this Dalton kid, whereas here at least she's sprinkled throughout the entire film.
Gets attacked here and there, choked, punched.
Yeah, running up the stairs, looking after the baby, running down the stairs, having a stroller thrown at her. Very domestic things.
The teapot, and I was like, I laughed because I was like, this is actually, because this is how a fight would go down if someone was like really going at it in the kitchen. Like, someone would have to grab the teapot and clock someone else with that. I was there for it.
That she is not dead from that kettle throw, I have no idea.
It's basically Mr. and Mrs. Smith, though, right? Like, let's just throw household items at each other until one of us dies.
I don't know why you get hit with random things in the movies and then you crawl. I'm like, look, you either be knocked out or you wouldn't. Like, I don't really think you didn't hurt your leg. Like, get up,
Well, okay, so they start shooting this film in January of 2013. Filming lasts for 25 days, and we have a slightly larger budget of $5 million, so 5 times that of the first film.
Ooh, broke the bank.
Yeah. Originally scheduled for a September 20th release date, they moved it up a week to hit that Friday the 13th date, and yeah. This was expected to open to max $35 million on its opening weekend. It earned $20 million alone that Friday, making it the biggest opening day in September box office history at the time. It went on to be the #1 film its opening weekend, taking in $41 million.
So a little front-loaded on the Friday.
8 times its budget. Like,
nice.
That's where this Blumhouse model started clicking, I think. But yeah, it went on to gross $84 million domestically and $78 million internationally for a worldwide gross of $162 million. And yeah, as I said earlier, it seems like the international numbers for the sequels are higher than the domestic grosses. And so I don't know. Does horror do really well internationally? Because I feel like I don't see a lot of numbers for horror films internationally, but maybe I'm wrong in that respect.
I thought the same thing. I don't remember hearing that. I definitely heard about other movies and how much it factors into the overall success, but I don't remember hearing that a lot about horror.
It is definitely unusual. I would say this may have done particularly well because it's not especially American. Like, it kind of translates a little bit better to other countries because it's not specifically saying like, oh, it's set in New York or it's set in LA or something like that. So I wonder if they were just able to market it as like, hey, here's a North American J-horror paranormal movie.
Maybe so, yeah.
Well, this movie did not get as well of a reception as the first film. We're looking at a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 4.8 out of 10. It's got a 40 out of 100 on Metacritic, and Letterboxd users have given it a 5.8 out of 10. General consensus with these films just based on reviews. First one's the best, then 3, then 2, then 4.
Okay. It is wild to me, too, that this film did as well as it did, and they didn't lock down Byrne and Wilson immediately to do another sequel. Like, it's weird that we waited this long to get a proper sequel to this film.
But I think this is what Drac is saying, though, right? Because Lin Shaye became kind of the de facto star of this franchise.
True.
I also think at this time, like, Rose Byrne and Patrick Wilson were really blowing up. So I don't know if they would have been all that interested in a sequel to this, especially considering this does kind of put a button on the Lambert family.
Well, that is fair.
But yeah, that's it. That's all I got. So let's start with this 10-minute prologue.
Here we go. So we open at Lambert House in 1987 as young Elise, who is indeed voiced by Lin Shaye, but she is portrayed by actress Lindsay Syme, as well as young Carl, who is played by Hank Harris, are interviewing young Josh. Folks are going to hear young, old, further, possess. Like, I'm trying to give you monikers so that you have an understanding of who all of these people are at various time periods. But yes, young Josh is played by Garrett Ryan. And Elise ends up playing this kind of game of hot and cold to determine the malignant spirit who wants to possess him. And this is all overseen by his mother, Lorraine, who in this timeline is played by Jocelyn Donahue, who we fucking love.
Love her. Okay, I'm sorry. We have gone 30 seconds and we have not mentioned the dub on this poor actress playing Elise.
I mean, I mentioned it. You just didn't react.
I'm reacting. I'm sorry. What do y'all think of this? Because I think that this dub, the issue is, and again, that's why I went back and I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, at least her scenes. So, like, does her voice sound the same? It does. The problem is her voice, even though this woman does look like what you would think a young Lin Shaye would look like.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It does not match her at all.
No.
It doesn't. But I don't know. I liked it because I felt like, again, like, I appreciate that kind of weird camp, and I just like that it's so distinct, you know, that you immediately knew who it was. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like, it's a weird like voice drag. Kind of funny. But also it had me zeroed in on the lips. Like, the rest of the room disappeared. Even the edges of the screen kind of went black in my brain because all I saw were the lips in Lin Shaye's voice.
So what you're saying is she would have won the lip sync.
I was going to say, that's a real lip sync.
Shantae? No, I can't say it.
But well, and that's the thing. I think it's not a bad dub in the sense of, it all lines up very well. And I actually think that this Lindsay Symes, I'm sorry, Joe.
Yes.
Lindsay Symes. I think she actually gets a lot of Lin Shaye's mannerisms. There's a moment whenever she's like, looks really stressed and she kind of smiles and she's like, can I meet him? That's like a dead ringer for the exact same thing she does in that first movie. So it's like, okay, good. Like, she clearly studied her movements, and so it's good. It's just really,
it's like Uncanny Valley, the audio edition.
You're right though. The way she walked up the stairs and everything too, like she nailed it. I think
she walked like an old lady. That's what we're saying.
She walks like Lin Shaye.
Matriarchal.
But I do love Jocelyn Donahue in this. I wish we had. I'm glad we get more of her later in the film. But she's good.
Yeah. So basically, the purpose of this is to gently remind you of what the fuck happened in Insidious Part 1, Chapter 1. And also to re-acknowledge the fact that Josh used to have the same powers as Dalton, but he was made to forget them by Elise. So then we get the title card and the credits.
I will say, and I understand why we're kind of like rushing through the exposition of like, hey, this is what the further is, this is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. It's really fast in this prologue because, again, the movie assumes that we as the audience have probably already seen this, or we're catching up people who haven't seen the first one. But when you go back and watch the first one, like, that explanation of the further is like a full 10-minute scene. And so it just feels a little bit rushed in this opening for me.
Absolutely. It's sequelitis, right? Like, you all know what we're doing. Let's just do it.
I am all for movies, too, that just pick right up. You know, the sequels pick right up where the end of the first one ends, because I'm into the story. Like, I hate it when a movie will do a sequel or something and it just jumps and it's not related at all. Like, it drives me crazy. So I like when it just almost feels like it's a continuation of the story, even if it, you know, the writing and the vibe is different.
All right, so Drac, how do you feel about Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where they basically just repurpose?
I hate it. That's
name.
Swan's worst. That's Swan's most hated movie.
No, like I'm never good with like, what's your favorite this or what's your least favorite that? And when I watched Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 was something that I came across like later in life. And at the end of the credits, I was like, the next time someone asks me what is the worst horror movie I've ever seen, I now have the answer.
Okay, wait, but did you not find enjoyment out of how stupid that movie was, though?
Oh, I just couldn't. Couldn't.
No, because I think I was like, look, you have to watch them all. So like we watched them all around Christmas. That's what happened. Yeah.
Watch that first one. I'm invested. Let's just throw in the second one. Let's make it a double bill. What the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly.
This is not as bad as an egregious of an example as that, but then what do you think about then like the Friday the 13th part 2 and 3, where we basically open with a whole the last 5 minutes of the previous movie?
Well, I was okay with it, but I was mad because I was like, oh, okay, she's going to live and be like the final girl this year. I'm like, she's dead. What the fuck? I'm like...
It's mean. I kind of like the meanness, but also it's like, oh, Alice, okay.
I bet it was back when it was like edgy to do. You know what I mean? It was like, no one's ever done this before, so let's do it. And it'll be edgy and we'll kill off our main character. You didn't expect that, you know? I don't know. Maybe it was like that.
Yeah, but could you imagine?
I think it's also important to acknowledge that movies were sometimes doing this because they didn't have the original out on VHS, right? They didn't have a 45-day window where they could just stream something. So they were like, oh, we need to remind people what happened in the last movie because they may not have seen it.
Oh, that's totally true.
Yeah,
it wasn't just like streaming right before the one. Yeah.
Okay, but see though, so for Friday the 13th, though, it's like, okay, we're gonna help the audience because they might not be able to access the original. But for Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, it's like no one's ever gonna know.
No one saw the first one, right?
They're like, nobody saw it. Who cares?
Oh, it was the box that was seared in my mind as a child that made me attracted to that film in the first place. How scary, you know, it seemed scary. And the same, there's other ones too, like the Evil Dead 2 has a great like cover art, and House, which is like a film I've never seen, but that like dismembered hand at the doorbell, you know, just a couple of that just kind of stick out.
So many good movie posters.
See, I mean, I have all those too from like, you know, the days of yore with like Blockbuster and stuff. But for me, it's always this really shitty ass like 90s direct to video horror movies like The Dentist and The Dentist 2 or Bleeders with those disgusting white humanoid alien things.
Yeah, I think we actually did a Patreon mini-sode about like our favorite movie posters, and most of them came from the 80s and 90s.
They're so good.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of the prologue, we jump back to the present time, and basically we're now catching up on the last few minutes of the first film. So we touch base with Renee, who is played by Rose Byrne, and she's being interviewed by Detective Sendall, who is played by Michael Beach, basically about what happened after they discovered Elise's body, and obviously Patrick Wilson, aka now adult husband Josh, he was acting a little bit shifty. And you're kind of like, okay, so this is where we're going to go. Josh is now 100% possessed, and this is the new movie.
I will say, I'm glad that this whole cop thing doesn't become an actual subplot in this movie.
But also, why is he in here?
I don't... for all the viewers who were like, excuse me, a woman was murdered in their house. Would no one call the police?
It's ridiculous. Instead, it's like, oh yeah, she's got marks on her neck, so she was definitely murdered. We're going to match them to your husband. We'll give you a call later to tell you he's been cleared. Goodbye, movie.
That is so weird.
Is it? Yeah. Do you think they would have actually put him in jail? Because it makes sense.
Probably.
Yeah, actually, a lot of I feel like a lot of horror movies do that. Then they'll be like, "Oh, well, duh, it was the ghost, so we're all innocent," like no one goes. But you're like, wait, like no cop. They'd be like, "You're crazy, and I'm arresting you." Like no one. You could be like, "It was the ghost, and everything's figured out now." Like Tangina helped us. They'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Like,
yeah, Tangina just up on the stand saying like, "Y'all, it was the ghost. It was not him."
I'm really glad you mentioned that though, because honestly, like both of these movies give me huge Poltergeist vibes. And whenever
100%.
whenever people talk about the goofiness of Specs and Tucker, it takes me out of the movie. I was like, yeah, but Poltergeist also has some goofy like mediums coming in. And I saw The Entity for the first time last year, the Barbara Hershey ghost rape movie, and it was weird because it's very similar where she's like, hey, I'm getting raped by this ghost, and she invites, paranormal people, and they're also really weird and kooky. But it doesn't ruin the vibe of the film, but I have to believe that was stunt casting on James Wan's part when he cast Barbara Hershey in the first film, because they play out very similarly to the way it does in The Entity as well.
Okay, so speaking of Barbara Hershey, that is where we are moving into. So we are moving back in with Lorraine, safety in her place, except of course this is where Josh grew up, so we know from the prologue that this house ain't fucking safe.
Well, but it would be if he wasn't possessed.
Well, this is the thing, right? The whole premise of the film is it doesn't matter where you go. If you're bringing a possessed person with you, you got ghosts.
Yeah.
So Josh ends up bidding goodnight to his son's Foster, who is a child actor named Andrew Astor, who has absolutely nothing to do in this movie, just like he didn't in the first film.
Well, you know who's really not pulling her weight around is this baby.
Oh, Callie?
Callie.
Well, she has her stunt coming up in a few scenes.
She jumped out of the crib. I mean, come on, what are you talking about?
That baby is magic. And of course, we also have Dalton, who is played by Ty Simpkins, who will reprise his role in the new film.
With a horrible head of hair.
Oh, Jesus, that hair. That's got to be a terrible wig, right?
No, I think that's just his hair. I think he's like in his early 20s, so it's like the thing right now. I don't know.
Let me get. I haven't seen it. Is it like super curly in the front and top?
It's just really long.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like a mushroom cut if the mushroom cut was only in the back.
What?
I'm
like
seeing that.
length.
I'm seeing that a lot now. I think it's on trend. Golden Girl's hair is great on like teen boys now.
I'm not a fan.
I mean, again, like not shading. Y'all do what makes you look pretty. I mean,
it doesn't make him look pretty. This actor is pretty, and that haircut makes him look unfuckable.
Yeah, but I assume he feels pretty with that hair. Otherwise, why would he have it?
Because hair and makeup said, this is the look we're giving you. You're a college boy. Goodbye.
Oh.
It's not you that's haunted. It's your hairdo.
I just had this image of him just coming to the set and just like walking onto the screen, no hair or makeup. So that's clearly not happening.
Wow. One day we'll get you on a set and you can learn.
One day.
Okay. So, yes, he's tucking in these boys and they are playing with Chekhov's telephone cans and twine.
Yeah. That's something like, okay, this part of the movie is what I really like about it, because again, it's kind of something that's kind of goofy, but I like that they find new things. In the first movie, it's the gas mask. You're like, what the fuck is this? And it's really effective. And so this, we get these cans and the dice. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're quite as effective or maybe as innovative as things in that first movie, but I still appreciate them just being like, let's do something that no one's really done before.
The dice was, I will say, was a little distracting because Swan kept yelling out Yahtzee every time.
It's not untrue.
I think for me, I kept being like, wait, how many dice are there? How many sides are on a dice? How many possible...
I did that too, yeah.
Well, what if they want to say, like, a letter with two T's? Anyway, I'm thinking about it too much.
Wait, hold on. I'm like, they cut too far. I'm like, wait, I didn't get to see what it was.
But isn't that why we end up with Our Lady of the Angles? And it's like, because they don't have enough E's on the die or something?
That is.
That's true. You think at that point you just have more dice? Honestly, just do a Scrabble box.
Exactly.
He's like, who's here? I can't tell you. You don't have another E.
More letters. Need more letters.
Boy. Okay, so yes, we're settling back into domestic life. Meanwhile, Renee is investigating mysterious piano playing, and yes, she does discover that their infant daughter, Callie, has miraculously jumped out of her crib. And when she confronts Josh, he basically gaslights her and says, you know what, we just got our son back, so you basically need to shut the fuck up because everything's fine.
Which I was, I had to play catch up, admittedly during this film because it's been a long time since I saw the first one. And like you said, the prologue was like so fast. I was like, okay, wait, what? Okay, sure. Let me just kind of like hold all my questions and all will be explained in time, which it was.
I'm sure I'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. But once we got to that place, I'd be like, your husband's treating you like shit. Like you shouldn't stand for this at all. And then yeah, the possession is there, and I started to catch up.
But that is the thing, though, and I agree with what we said earlier. Where it's like, I kind of wish this tete-a-tete between the two of them took up more of this first half of the film, because I think that is the more interesting aspect of it. Until we get maybe a little bit too far into Shining homage territory in the end, but I feel like it's a waste of these two actors to like not really use them much in the first half of this film.
Right. This movie is weirdly overstuffed. Like, I think it likes all of its characters and it wants to give them a bunch of things to do. And in some ways, I'm appreciative. Like, I kind of like that we're not spending the entire movie just back in the house with this domestic couple. But so much of the movie is cross-cutting that you start to think, like, there are a couple times where I was just like, what is the point of this scene? Like, I get that we needed to touch base with where everyone is at, but also it's too much. Maybe just let some of this breathe for a moment.
Yeah, I think so too. Although I will say, when I was thinking about, he was like, don't believe in them and they'll go away. When I'm like, okay, you're kind of right. Like, I can see myself saying these things to one of my friends that's like freaked out in the house one night. I'm like, shut up. There's no go. You know what I mean? Like a little bit. So I don't know. Anyways.
I actually do wonder what Parker Crane's like long con was, because he does say later in the end, oh, mother wanted me to kill you, but I said no. So what?
He was just going to decompose?
Yeah. Again, whatever. It's
maybe
the
it was
motivations
gonna kill
are suspect in this movie.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's going to lead. Yeah, that's true. That's a good question.
No, we were trying to talk this through too, and like it would be jumping like really far to the end because like, I was confused. Is it like, who's the bad guy here? And I guess ultimately it's like, it's Mother Mortis, right? Like that's what that was my answer when the blank came. Like, who is ultimately like the villain here? And she was just manipulating her son to be like this kind of like cross-dresser. Was like, that's the kind of the idea. Like, confirm or no?
No, so I think you are right, but it was interesting because when they're talking about, oh, we have to kill her, we have to stop her, I actually wasn't always clear if they were talking about the mother or Parker, her, themselves.
Yeah, but that's kind of genius, right? I thought that was like clever and like savory, and I kind of enjoyed not knowing.
Well, if it's supposed to be grounded, then we should have known, right? It should have been a little more clear.
But also, I don't know if that is the movie being smart or if that is the movie not having its shit kind of figured out, because I was also confused by that. Like, do they even know that they're dealing with two different malignant entities? Because when they're saying she, are they just talking about the bride? Or are they talking about the woman in white? And I do also feel like maybe we should pause the plot to talk a little bit about some pronoun issues. Like, do we want to refer to Parker as a he or a she?
Well, it would have helped if it's all about the inflection. If they had been like, oh, it's her, or like, oh, her, you'd be like, oh, okay, you'd know which one they were talking about.
So here's the thing. I think if we're talking about child Parker, it makes sense to call him.
Right.
Because at that point, he hasn't... Oh, God.
Well, he still identifies as Parker on the drawing, and that's what gets him in trouble. So he's clearly still identifying personally as a boy.
But post-attempted castration Parker, do we then think that Parker identifies as a woman?
I don't think so, because they said costume, and he said he put the stuff on when he would kill people, but not that he just walked around. I don't think he was like trying to be trans or anything.
That's from an outsider's perspective, and they might not have the insight to say, oh, this isn't a costume. This is the way, this is what I would prefer to wear and how I would want to present myself. So I don't know. I think that that could potentially be problematic.
Right, because it's coming from Carl, right? He's the one who sort of, and you're just like, I'm sorry, Carl, what is your qualifications, your credentials there?
Yeah. Carl, it might be time to sit the fuck down and shut the fuck up. Thank you. But I kind of feel like he's a victim of like a mental abuse, and maybe as a child there was less, he still had that sense of like self-identity as Parker, but as an adult he's just basically completely messed up and rewired to the point where you're like self-castrating and ultimately committing suicide.
Okay, so here's the thing though, and this is the $1 million question. Are we a little surprised that we are using a plot from Sleepaway Camp in a movie released in theaters in 2013?
Boy. This is like Lee Winnell combing through the Encyclopedia of Horror and being like, oh yeah, we're still doing the trans Vic villain thing, right?
Yeah.
That's a thing. We're going to do it
all the time, right?
I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's just throughout history. It just repeats itself over and over in some weird form or another,
Okay, so here's the thing. It's very tired. It's very overdone, particularly in 2013. At that point, we had like decades of it.
Decades.
But also, I find it, like Trace, you and I wrote an editorial about this on Bloody Disgusting, and at the time we said, we don't think there's any kind of malicious intent here. It's probably, doing a soft reference to Sleepaway Camp in the same way that the end of the film is doing a soft reference to The Shining and other films like Poltergeist.
Yeah.
But I think it's really problematic when you just kind of dump a hot potato in the audience's lap and say, well, here, this is enough motivation. Like, this explains things, right? We're not actually going to unpack it. We're not going to let the character maybe speak for themselves or even spend a lot of time with them. So it just becomes this kind of like, hey, here's this familiar trope that we're doing. We just kind of pulled it out of thin air, but we don't care that it's problematic. We just did it.
So I'm actually a little ashamed of myself that I haven't put this Sleepaway Camp connection together before, because not only are we doing this whole abusive adult is trying to force a child into a different gender, it's also that the parent character, Sleepaway Camp, it's Aunt Martha, I think, and then here it's this woman in white. But it's also like both of these performances are so over the top, so campy, in a movie that has these elements to it, but the performance of this mother seems like it's in another film entirely.
Oh boy, yeah. I think we've already referred to her as a kind of drag queen campy character, but that's an interesting comparison because, I mean, we get a little bit of background on her. She says, your husband left, so now I don't want to refer to you as Parker. I want you to identify as a girl. Your name is Marilyn. And you're like, okay, but she's ridiculous, right? Completely ridiculous, yes.
I mean, but again, it's so funny because I love this. I actually love all of Basuti's moments. Are either one of y'all like gamers, by the way?
Not like hardcore, but we've definitely both played games.
If either one of y'all played the new like God of War games on the PS5, she actually plays Freya in those games. But she's also the in another queer connection, she is the cheating lesbian mama in Curse of Chucky.
Oh, wow.
I mean, cheating lesbian mama is the only credit anyone would need at the end of the movie.
It needs to be the name of a movie.
Oh my god, I would watch that in a heartbeat.
Right?
Streaming soon on Lifetime.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I didn't read a lot of like controversy about this subplot back in 2013, but I also don't know if Twitter was there at the time.
No, it wasn't as much of a conversation,
No. I feel like it would be absolutely incinerated today.
Yeah, I think it's just because it feels so tired, right? And I'm sure there were a bunch of people who went to this, got blindsided, and suddenly realized, oh, great, now I've got to deal with this familiar storyline again. But yeah, I mean, when I was doing research, I found one article that was taking the film to task, and it was from 2014.
Yeah, I saw one. This might have been actually the same one, but it was on one of those like ones where it's like a blog, but they don't have their names accredited to it. But
right.
It was a trans woman who was saying, I love the first movie. I went to go see this. And when the credits rolled, I hid in my seat hoping that no one would notice that I was a trans woman.
Oh, no.
Because of the film I had just seen.
Wow.
Oh, fuck. That's horrible.
And that's that kind of lived experience. Like, I don't have that experience, obviously. But yeah, I can't imagine, like, if you're going to see a movie that you think is like, oh, yeah, it's a sequel to one of my favorite movies. And then this happens. So I think there's a positive read to be made, much like in Sleepaway Camp, where it's like, hey, this is what happens when you force a gender that someone doesn't identify on them. But that's not what the takeaway is going to be for most people who watch this movie.
Yeah, I just think it's someone's like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the kill? You know what I mean? It feels very like that. Like it's
a twist.
or almost
Yeah.
like it's like campy in the fact that it's so throwbacky. You know, it just seems kind of campy to me. Like it's like really that okay, sure.
Well,
like,
it further demonizes something that's already, people consider like distorted or twisted in it already, like at base.
Right.
So it's like now they're, if you wear panties and you're a man, you're a killer, you're a murderer.
Hey, you don't know. Maybe the mom is actually a drag queen. We don't know that. That's why they put so much makeup on her. You don't know.
A whole different film in that.
Yeah. Maybe they're playing us.
Well, and that's something interesting too, though, because what I think a part of the reason this whole Parker Crane thing, gender dysphoria, whatever, came around, is because the bride in black in the first movie was also played by a man.
And I loved it at the Universal Horror Nights.
Yeah,
the character. This is so funny. So people don't typically know what we look like out of drag, and we don't show that or anything. So we went to Universal Horror Nights. We always go to all that stuff, and we were in the Insidious 2 maze, and we were going through it, and the bride in black character like kind of jumps out at you, whatever, and so she jumps out. And I could, it's a guy in drag, and he's like,
right.
"Oh my god, I love your show," and I was like, "Oh my god!" But I like that
Leave
they
it to the
had it
queers.
be, that it was a person in drag. I like that.
A question so because so many people don't know what you look like out of drag, do you ever like fuck with people when you're out in public?
No, I don't want it. I do not want them to know I don't like it. It really freaks me out. Like, yeah, I'm like in our regular life, I'm very just more quiet and sort of I like to be to myself and just I don't like that part of the job. Yeah.
Well, it's like your stage character, right? Like you assume a completely different persona, you become the character when you're in drag, and then when you're not in that, then you're just living your authentic regular human life, right?
Yeah, and some I noticed like with other drag artists I know that are kind of have like big personalities when they're in drag, but they're like that out of drag. They just take off the wig, and it's like they're loud and they're tell jokes and all that. And I'm not like that at all. Like it's like it is a total transformation, and I'm just, like it's not just my body that's in drag, it's kind of my mind too, and so it freaks me out.
It's not your body that's in drag. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but sometimes people will notice our voices.
Right. Yes, we get
that
clocked.
happens a lot.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times that it happened. We were shopping we were downtown in downtown LA, very random, and like from the next aisle over, it was like, oh my god, I think I recognize those voices. And the hairs on the back of my neck went up. Yeah,
They're like, it's either Drac and Swan or it could be Lin Shay.
Yeah, I mean that's a little weird, but
for y'all, you're like, who the fuck is on the other side of this aisle?
Yeah. I don't know. I like people to. I feel like it's like a fantasy, and I'm like, for me at least, not to kind of go into it too much, but I remember, when I was sort of first going out to drag shows or queer clubs or whatever, and I loved like the drag characters. They were so like powerful and interesting, and I remember there was this one, and I'm not going to say who it was, but they had like such a really cool punk attitude and look and everything, and then social media came around, right? And so then all of a sudden they would start getting on their drag account out of drag in like the grocery store and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, and they'd be like complaining about the price of bread and stuff, and I was like, oh my god. So that like just
punk rock about
you're ruining everything.
Oh, totally. Think you ruin everything, and I'm like, I will never do that to anybody that likes my drag. I'm like, I'm just not gonna do that. Like, I'm like, buy the fantasy, sell it hook, line, and sinker. I never want to like disturb that.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't. It was bad. Anyway.
All right, I'm going to steer us gently back to the plot. We're up to the 1986 tape watching. So yes, we are reintroduced to Specs, who was played by screenwriter and filmmaker Lee Winnell, as well as Tucker, who is played by Angus Sampson. And we see on this tape that Josh is talking to someone, and they take note of it because it seems a little bit weird. So put a pin in it. We'll come back to that.
I will say, though, and we will come back to it, but this is actually one of my favorite additions that this film does. I think this is great.
The time travel.
The time stuff. I think it's really fun.
I'm a huge fan of it, though. I love it too. Like, I thought it was like one of the most successful things that this script got right, you know, because they tried a lot, but this one I think they got right.
I mean, like, seeing this in theaters, the moment when you're like, oh my God, that's the scene from the first movie. Like, the collective, like, from the audience.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too because you realize when you go back and watch that first Insidious, they don't answer. Like, who was at the door? How did it get like blown open? Or who was knocking? And it's like, oh, I don't think that they had this second film really planned out.
No.
But they clearly did have a couple of Easter eggs that they maybe anticipated paying off later.
I disagree. I think this is let's look at the first movie. What's something we can manipulate with a time travel sequence in
that
this
part? I'm like, now we know what they were doing for a year because you said earlier they're trying to figure these pieces out.
I mean, look, truthfully, is there a bit of a plot hole here? Because, okay, like, time doesn't exist. So technically then anyone who has ever existed, be it present, past, or future, would be in the further, technically.
Well, except at least makes it seem like it's a purgatory kind of transition.
Yes, she does.
So, like, you could leave it.
Everybody passes through here. That's what she says.
But she said she left and then came back.
Yeah.
This is also true.
She's got like a visitor's pass.
It kind of seemed like she was cruising through like a red light, and then she was like, maybe I'll just pull a Yui for a minute.
She was like, I was in a place, a much better place. I'm like, and you came back?
You came back to this?
What are you, Buffy season 6? Get out of here.
I don't love anyone enough to leave whatever like paradise afterlife there was to go back to the further. I'm sorry.
She's not even related to them. It's not like I came back for my family. She's like, I came back for some family that basically got me killed.
Well,
Fuck
don't
you.
forget, then at the end, she stays. She doesn't even go back. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? You're crazy.
It honestly feels like they wanted, I mean, I know she gets her own movie spinoff, but I could totally see them being like, Lynn Shay, paranormal investigator, coming to sci-fi in the fall.
I mean, that is what 3 and 4 is. You're right. but they're prequels because she's alive there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so Lorraine goes in to check on Dalton in his sleep, and he is definitely asleep, but he's having a conversation with her, and he says that there's someone standing behind her, and it properly freaks her out, which I appreciate, because often in movies, people are like, shh, dum-dum, you're fine, nothing's happening. So I like that she, in this long take, goes down the stairs, she's checking around the house, she goes into the bathroom, and this is when she spots the woman in white, who, yes, as we said, is played by Danielle Basutti, and then she's startled by Josh. Ooh, in case you didn't make the connection, they're basically the same person. And he, once again, is gaslighting all of the female members of his family, so he says, just don't fucking say anything, because I don't want to scare my family.
I will say that I love Wan and cinematographer and John R. Leonetti's camera work here. Oh God, Leonetti? Shit. Editor, in case y'all didn't know, editor John R. Leonetti did go on, he used to direct films. He directed the classic sequel, 1997's Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Holy shit.
Famously torpedoed by the studio.
And he also went on to direct, the year after this movie, the original Annabelle.
Oh.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I like these long takes following her around.
Oh, sure.
They're a little derivative of the first film, which is fine. I actually think my issue here is that we have this scene, and then I think in about 5 minutes we have the exact same scene, but with Renee instead of Lorraine.
Yeah.
There's something interesting in the background here about the idea that this female spirit, I guess, if spirits can be gendered, the spirit is acting in the physical world through the skin of a man and gaslighting all other females. Ooh. It's kind of interesting.
But that's another part that makes it a little bit confusing. Like, when we get to the end, it's very visually obvious that we are playing with that. Like, gender is very much a construct because it appears as though Parker is operating Josh's body, but we see Elise smacking Michelle, aka the woman in white, and it seems to be having an effect on Josh's body in the sort of human realm. And I was just like, what are the logistics of this world? Like, are we double possessing? Is this like a double possessive penetration? What is going on?
So we also know what they were doing during that year, because they were like on either like a lot of mushrooms. We were smoking something, because they were like, how deep? Yeah. Which way do we go? We possess forward, backward, or double back? What do you think?
But that's also kind of the thing, though, right? Where we're talking about. I would have liked to have known more about Michelle, because Parker, we know, has killed at least 15 people. And I do have questions about how there is this cross-dressing killer the newspapers have called the Bride in Black that has killed 15 plus people in this town, and no one seems to know about it.
Or not only that, even after they're dead and gone, no one looks in the house. They're just like, well, let's just lock the door and leave it there.
I was like, going to move that trapdoor bookcase and just find 15 women's bodies covered in sheets?
Yeah, you wouldn't smell it and think, well, there's 15 bodies missing. I wouldn't think to look there where it smells like it, like, I don't know.
But also, talking about, like the transgender or the cross-dressing, like, killer trope, I couldn't really figure out, because it seems to be, okay, he's killing people for his mother, so his mother's making him kill these people. I don't really know why.
No.
But then sometimes it seems like he's killing just for the hell of it.
Yes, and then I thought for a minute, because wasn't it the woman, and wasn't it the mom that had the saw in a flashback? Like, are we 100% sure that he killed them all?
Yes, I think you're right. But she did have the saw.
Yeah, what did they, maybe he brought them there?
That's interesting, because we hear that he tried to castrate himself, not from him or from his medical records. It's the nurse who says it, right?
Yes.
So...
This is going back to the whole, I don't think there's no malicious intent here. It's just more underthought than anything else.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very sort of poorly executed, kind of haphazard. Oh, well, this will satisfy. It's an explanation of sorts, but we're not gonna do anything with it.
Yeah, it's like cheaply and quickly explained. I think a lot is, but I think we're workshopping this thing pretty good right now, because I think
we figured it out.
I think she could she have possessed her own son for a minute and tried to go for the castration?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I think you're right. I think that makes total sense.
Which is a way grimmer read of this movie. It's like this person is not just killing people because they have internalized the struggle that their mother put on them, but maybe the mother actually forced them to self-castrate. Like, that is some grim ass shit.
Well, yeah, and if you take it further, then he kills himself, and then he tries to possess a new body. He wants his body back. He wants he's always wanted his childhood back, and he's being taunted by his mother. You have to keep you have to keep killing. Do you want that body to disappear? Do you want that body to deteriorate? Kill them all. Like, it's like really demented.
Okay, wait. I this is a completely different movie, but I have a fix for this. So what if the mom is like trying to live forever, and so she's going to skeleton key her son by like getting rid of him and taking over his body, which is why she's trying to raise him as a girl.
Oh, wow.
Well, in these movies, typically when the mom is like behind it, the mom is either really dead or the mom is like granny, they can't kill anybody or whatever. But like this mom seems pretty powerful. You know what I mean?
She's agile as fuck.
Yeah, so that's what makes it seem like who's the killer or because it almost seems like, she doesn't seem to need anybody. She's like flipping people around and throwing them against the wall and stuff. So I'm like, why do you even need this guy to kill people?
And she's serving face and she's beat to the gods.
Yeah.
It honestly feels like, okay, the Bride in Black was an interesting character. We want to do something with her in the second film, but then we give the character this backstory. It should have just been, you know what, we're not doing the Bride in Black anymore. We're doing the Woman in White. She doesn't have a kid. She's the killer.
Yeah. Or just make her be the Bride in Black, or something like that.
Sure.
Something.
Yeah. I mean, we see a shroud. It's like, it's a costume. You just put it on and you start killing.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, when he's in the drag, like, it's scary. I kind of love it.
Oh, yeah. We get it whenever he's strangling Renee and we, like, cut and it's like, oh, it's all of a sudden the Bride in Black instead of Patrick Wilson. Those are really, really effective shots.
True San Francisco realness happening
It's just happening every day there. Okay. So in the morning, Dalton recounts his dream. The film loves to kind of double back and show us things from different perspectives. So we end up seeing his dream again, but this time we can actually see the woman in white watching Lorraine as she checks on him in his sleep. And he admits that he also then woke up and overheard and also saw Josh fully having a conversation with no one in the hall.
Yeah. I won't talk about the ways I want to fix this film anymore, but I would have had this more like they're suspicious of him like way earlier in the film.
Right, because they seem like a bunch of dum-dums for not catching on. Like, Josh, you seem to be acting like a completely different person who is maybe coming undone mentally. Let's pass the cereal and get off to work like a normal day.
I guess the thing I give it is like what you mentioned is that all this crazy stuff just happened to them, and they're probably individually trying to put themselves back together to a degree, right?
True.
So even they're like, why are you acting weird? And they're like, oh yeah, I know why. You were just in some weird like upside down dimension, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
If this movie was made in 2018, this would all just be a metaphor for the trauma.
Oh,
God. Yes, it would.
Wow.
But that's also a reason why I think this movie does work better if you double feature it with the first movie. I think it works less so if you just watch it by itself.
Right. It truly is. I think in our editorial, you said that this was basically the fourth act stretched to a feature length.
Yep. That's exactly what it is.
Okay. So, Specs and Tucker play the 1986 video for Lorraine, and we can see adult Josh in the fucking background, and it's a great reveal. Like, it's such a fun kind of moment for this movie.
I think it's too, because, like, you know, when it happens, he's like, oh, I'll show you. And you're like, oh, he's just responding to his mother. I think that's all really cleverly revealed.
I think so, too. That's one of the things I really liked about the referencing. In a sense of a sequel, it really paid respect to the first one, where a lot of sequels are just random, you know?
Yeah, this definitely feels like it. Like, you could almost imagine that cold open and this videotape that we then watch a couple of times throughout the film. If you didn't know better, you might mistake it and think, oh yeah, we saw that in the first film, didn't we? Because it feels so organic.
Yeah, I agree.
Not organic is when Sendel calls and says, like, hey, your husband's not a murderer. Goodbye. I'm not in this movie anymore. So whatever.
But you know what? Thank heaven for that. He's no more cops in this movie.
Absolutely.
Help me understand something, because I'm dense sometimes. I miss something. So who choked her?
I mean, it was Patrick Wilson, was it not?
So why would it not show up as him?
Because the idea is that his fingerprints have become Parker Crane's fingerprints. So
no, that's dumb. That is dumb.
This is not the first movie I've seen do something like this,
No,
though.
it's true.
But there's a very specific movie. I can't figure it out. But that's the whole idea. But at the same time, then I'm surprised we don't have it wasn't your husband's fingerprints.
It was Parker Crane,
Funny story.
notorious killer of 15 women.
Yeah.
He's not in the database or anything.
Wait, well, they never found the body,
This
so
is
maybe
true.
his fingerprints were, you know? Yeah, how do they... I'm not even going to get into
Well,
that.
but he was in the hospital. I guess they didn't know. Oh, they didn't know he was a murderer when he was... Okay, because
he was just an elderly, senile man who tried to cut off his own penis.
Okay, wait. But now what you were telling me is that this killer went presumably uncaught. No one ever found out who the Bride in Black was.
Right. Cold case.
No bodies either.
These people still don't know about. They have to fucking read newspaper clippings to remember who this man is.
Well, that's not like, how do they know the Bride in Black killed all these people when they didn't find the bodies? Like, how do they? You know, it's like you would just say there was like a large case of missing people. I don't know.
But my issue too was like what type of embalming skills does he have or something? Because the level of preservation, I was like, are we supposed to seriously accept this? That's
when
gross.
we go to their house, I fully expected it to be a funeral home. Or
yeah.
But there are still skin on the bones of these corpses.
Because after all this time, those bodies would not smell. They would be practically skeletal.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
But you know what? It looks good though. There's one thing.
It does look good.
It was scary. Yeah.
James Wan created a lot of beautiful, like kind of like visuals, and I loved a lot of the camera work and like through the walls and like these zooms and whatever that effect is that you'll see, and you know, seemingly only horror movies at like high intensity moments where something really interesting happens in the background and the distortion. You know what I'm talking about? Like the spatial. What is that? Do we know what that's called?
I don't know what it's called, but I know the visual you're talking about.
I love it so much. It's like so effective, and all the loud noises and just these the bodies and the shrouds and just disappearing into darkness, like into almost infinity. It's really effective.
Well, and that's why again with the first film, like a lot of people they're like, oh, I love that movie until the third act. When they get to the further, and I was like, because I get it, it looks like they're on a stage with a fog machine, but honestly, that's what I like about it. Like, this is a very unique depiction of a purgatory afterlife space. And while it may look cheap to some, I actually thought it was really innovative.
I mean, here's the thing. It was fucking cheap. It was $1 million.
Good for her.
I'm saying, well, that's what I said. They had good people working on it because, I think it was shot beautifully and you didn't watch it and say, well, this is a cheap movie,
Yeah. No,
and
absolutely not.
So it's like they put their money in the right places.
Agreed.
And didn't make it overly ambitious where you're like, well, I'm just gonna go for it and not execute it.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, after all the conversation we've had about, the way it's shot and it's so beautiful and, we really appreciate Lorraine's walk through the house as a single take and stuff. Do we like it when we just repeat the same effect with Renee here as she kind of goes up the stairs, down the stairs, and things are kind of being thrown at her? Like, does it still work as well, or does it need to be more moody and red lighty and that kind of stuff?
I mean, I think that would have helped. They turned up the intensity, because the stuff seemed more violent. So I guess they were trying to maybe show that it was getting worse or something. I don't know, but a red light never hurts anything. Right?
True. I mean, I do like this moment where Michelle, aka the woman in white, just randomly smacks the absolute shit out of Renee to the point that she is knocked unconscious in the living room.
And then you see later that that's her cooldown power because she does it to her kid. That's her move.
If Renee had just happened to be holding a wire hanger before she got slapped, I would have been fine with it.
I told you no more, Parker.
Don't you dare!
All we're saying is that the woman in white is an iconic drag figure, and someone should be doing her on Snatch Game, or maybe a Dragula challenge.
Well, I was
apparently I'm doing it and didn't realize it. So
I mean, if you have another horror icons reimagine challenge, there you go.
God, there's so many good ones that they could have picked. I was like, why?
Like, I would not pick this weak as shit version.
Oh my God, it's true. When you think of the challenges, you never know, what they're gonna pick, and you have all these glorious ideas of what they're gonna do, and I'm like, really? That's what you did?
This is what you came up with, huh?
But you know what? I will say, though, I took issue with Joe Bob when he said, I don't know if Eva's Martian from Mars Attacks is a horror icon. And I was like, girl, you didn't grow up in the 90s.
I know. I was like, you're dead. Just keep talking.
That is disgusting.
We're spilling all the tea here. Okay, so Specs and Lorraine ask adult Carl, because this is a character who's still in this movie for some reason. He is played now by Stephen Coulter, and basically they need his help to contact Elise, because Lorraine says, if only we had Elise, we could figure out what the fuck is going on. So he shows up with his spirit dice, and we're talking with Elise, aka definitely not Elise, because she's being super weird and kind of vaguely threatening, but we end up getting directed to Our Lady of the Angels.
And we will spend a good 20 minutes going through this abandoned hospital, although it was shot in a real abandoned hospital in Los Angeles.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's nicely atmospheric. I appreciate these scenes, even though it's basically just a big, long microfiche exposition.
This is Linda Vista Community Hospital, by the way.
I bet you I know right where that is.
Where do you think it's that one down? It's not the one downtown, is it?
It's in Boyle Heights.
In Boyle Heights.
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Yeah, and it is so imposing, like right over the highway. Like you see it, that building has like an aura about it.
Because they filmed a bunch of other things in that same area, like in that abandoned hospital. Like, did they do Session 9 or something in there too?
We've lived in Los Angeles for a long time, and I have been into certain wings of that place before it actually shut down, and it was terrifying.
No, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have to go down this list. It's not very long. A, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the show was filmed some stuff there.
Oh, that terrible episode where she's in the mental institution?
I believe so. But hold on. Adam's Family Values, where the Pubert is given birth to, that's this hospital.
Oh,
Nice.
Tammy and the T-Rex.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
you got me there.
Dead Girl.
Hmm.
I know, guys. If y'all haven't seen Dead Girl, do, but just be prepared.
All the warnings.
All the warnings. Zombie Strippers, starring Jenna Jameson.
Well, of course.
And then, Insidious 2 and 3. Oh, and Lords of Salem was filmed there.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Anyway.
It is very scary, but I don't know if this bothers you all, but when you watch movies and they always have to go on some kind of, like you said, Scooby-Doo caper,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, there ain't files left in the building, you know? I'm like,
that's-
come on.
Confidential
That drives
records
me
around.
so crazy. I'm like, nobody would leave medical records around, you know?
Mhm.
I don't
Oh,
know.
we just all abandoned the hospital at the spur of a moment. Leave all the files. Nobody will come back for them.
And if they did, like, they're, first of all, okay, they're all print, okay, sure, but then it's like, I'm like, why don't you show us the sun up and sun down it took you to find that file? Because
Right.
like the chances that they're just left perfectly intact, no one broke in here, did anything with it. I don't know, it drives me insane.
They're all perfectly alphabetized still, right on the shelf.
You just locked the front door and no one bothered to come in. Not downtown Los Angeles. I'm like, yeah, right.
Yeah, there aren't people living in that hospital currently. Rent
They
control.
burned all
Sure.
the records for heat.
Oh, God.
So all this to say, yes, we do look through the hospital. We get a flashback to Lorraine and young Josh as he gets attacked by Parker Crane, who is played by Tom Fitzpatrick.
This scare got me, though. I'm a sucker. One of my favorite kind of scares is when the camera, it's still a single take, but the camera's like moving with the person as they're moving. So, Josh bends down and looks away, and then he comes up, and the camera comes up with him, and boom! We have this jump scare that I fucking love when he's sitting right up.
Okay, so yes, this is also where we learn that Parker was... He died shortly after this attack, but also that he did try to castrate himself. It's one of the reasons he was in the hospital. At this point, the film is going to cross-cut between four doing their investigation and then what's going on within the household. So we jump back to the house, and I'm going to call him Possessed Josh to keep it distinct. So Possessed Josh has his teeth falling out, and we do hear the woman in white's voice saying, hey, you're polluting this body, you're killing the living skin, and also kill the whole fucking family or else you're going to die.
Which, that's not true, right?
I mean, he definitely looks sicker as the movie progresses, but I don't know how killing the family does anything to help that.
That's what I'm saying. I think he's going to just decompose no matter what. I don't think killing people is going to stop his decomposition.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly is with the teeth falling out and all that, but yeah, I don't know. Unless there's something they didn't explain.
Which... I mean, there are some pretty gaping plot holes in this movie, so it's possible this was an earlier draft that just never got explained.
Yeah, because I wonder too, and not to go back, back step, but so he kills himself.
Mm-hmm.
Is the mom still alive? We don't know.
No,
You know
we
what
don't
I mean?
know.
Like what that time period, because it's almost like she could have died, and then maybe she was kind of possessing him a little bit. That could have used a little more clarity.
Is she hitching a ride on him or something? What's going on?
It's interesting that you mentioned the plot holes, though, because this movie does have a tendency to re-explain or over-explain things.
Yes, but not everything. It's like it's hitting the same marks repeatedly, but then there's whole other sections that just get passed over completely.
Yeah.
I'm even thinking, like the reveal we're about to get, when we're rolling the dice, and it's like, Mother Mortis, Mother of Death. It's literal, the mother of Parker Crane. I'm like, girl, we get it.
Wait. But also, how did you make that jump? Like, it could have just been some other spirit. We've dealt with a bunch in this universe.
I don't know.
Oh boy. Okay. So Josh ends up reassuring Renee when she finally wakes up from her slap coma that everybody's fine. Just ignore the dead things because you're giving them power. So he's still gaslighting her. It's very entertaining. He also then fails to recognize the song that she wrote for him in the first movie. Oh my god!
And she doesn't really react well enough to this.
I mean, you'd think that she would be much more receptive. Like, I like that when Lorraine comes to collect her, because she's like, oh, the problem is Josh. It's not the house. It's not Dalton. Lorraine just goes with her, which I was appreciative of. But at the same time, yeah, you'd be like, you're really not going to confront your husband when he forgets the original song you wrote for him?
Yeah,
Son
we
of
were
a
talking.
bitch.
I was like, I could have seen it almost being like, wait, or is it the mother-in-law? Like, if you were her for a minute, you could have been like, wait, but if the mother-in-law was actually behind all this, which you would be more inclined to mistrust because you're in her house and this is where all these things are happening. You know, I thought about that for a minute. I was like, oh, she kind of trusted her very easily.
Yeah,
it's true. Thankfully, Lorraine is a very sturdy character throughout these first two films. Like, she is very straightforward. I just want to help. You can trust me.
Yeah.
So after looking over these medical records, our fearsome foursome investigators do head over to the abandoned Crane house. This is when the film briefly turns into a found footage film. Not really sure why, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
This is when they see the dollhouse in Parker's room, and we have this moment where Tucker says, oh, well, I played with dolls when I was a child, and I was like, is this the movie trying to throw us off the scent, or are we just saying, hey, boys can play with girls' toys and it doesn't make them serial killers?
I don't know if the movie's smart enough to make that kind of a statement.
I can see that. I honestly did think that for a minute, though. Like, maybe they're trying to just,
normalize
like, hey,
it.
that's not what we're trying to. Yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Please don't hate us. This isn't a problematic thing. We swear.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought.
But this is our first glimpse of this girl ghost, or boy ghost in drag. So the character is played by Tyler James Griffin, and this character warns them that they will be killed if she discovers that you're here. And I'm using air quotes, scare quotes for she, aka mommy. So we get this moment where Dalton is terrorized by ghosts in a nightmare. It's fine. It's effective.
A lot of these, though, do remind me of scenes in The Conjuring. Like, whenever in the beginning when Elise reaches in the closet and, like, gets scratched, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like the wardrobe scene in The Conjuring.
Yep. This is when we get the reveal via the dice that we are dealing with, yes, the mother of death, or Parker Crane's mother, Michelle. This is where we find the corpse room. Again, it's good stuff. It's just, it's kind of, oh, okay. And then we move on.
Yeah.
So when Craig touches the bride's shroud, this is when we get a flashback. So apparently I don't know. Do we know that Carl is a psychic? Because when he touches the shroud, he gets this flashback, which is what allows him to say, oh yeah, like she wanted her son to identify as a different gender. But like, did we know that Carl had these abilities? Is that why he's partnered with Elise?
I didn't see it referenced anywhere. I don't think it was referenced before this, right?
It happens when they're in the hospital. He walked into the room, and I think he get overwhelmed with some energy or some flashback from what had happened in it previously.
Maybe they're trying to build him up because they're like, hey, maybe people are going to like him and we're going to have to make Insidious 3.
Well, that's the thing, though, right? Like, this character only exists because we don't have Elise yet in the movie. And I mean, look, it's fine. I think Carl's a fine character. I actually think he's kind of funny. I like his little dice gimmick, but
it's more the fact that he's introduced in this film, and there's a moment when he gets attacked by possessed Josh, and he seemingly dies, which is what allows him to get to the further, and then we walk it back so that no one dies in this movie. And I was like, didn't we introduce Carl to kill him? I thought that was the point.
Yeah, I thought that was confused about that at the end because he was like, oh, well, if I'm here, we know what that means. And they're all like, yeah. And, and Josh is like, well, I'm still alive. I mean, sorry, but like, help me get back. I need to help my kid. And they're like, okay. And then, I was really confused by that. I was like, why did they undo that?
Well, because at the very end, Elise is like, no, I felt your heartbeat when I hugged you. And I was like, and you waited this long to tell him that?
You know what? We had things to do. We needed to rescue Josh. Josh was really more important here. Sorry, Carl. Like, love you to bits, but honestly, not your movie.
Yeah, because I feel like she was like, well, you're not supposed to be here. Whatever for you, though. But, like, you're really not supposed to be here, Josh. Let's help you. And he's like, what?
Really
but I'm just saying, like, she knows from the first hug that Carl is alive and goes through the entire third act of this movie with him thinking he is dead.
Because there's like weird romantic tension between the two of them as well. Like, it kind of feels like there could be another film. And I'm fully confessing, I have not seen Insidious 3 or 4 at this point. So I don't know if this character shows up in the prequels and they do have romance.
I sensed that too. I thought they were definitely building that.
Because it feels like we should really care when bad things happen to Carl. Like, we're up to the moment where he tries to pull the con on possessed Josh so that he can inject him with the serum to knock him out, and then Specs and Tucker are gonna like help him. But I really like this scene because it feels like there is genuine danger that, like, oh shit, Carl's about to get fucking murdered.
I thought that too. I definitely felt like anxious during that moment. I was like, okay, this is a horror movie and they're gonna definitely do something brutal to this guy. I was kind of surprised that he, ends up making it out.
We talked about this earlier too. Like, Patrick Wilson is genuinely like
so
foreboding. I was like, okay, this is really effective. Like, I'm kind of scared, and like also he's a little hot. Like, I'm kind of into this.
I'm telling you, that scene when he has the knife behind his back and he's just smiling, I'm like, ooh, man, dude, like, this
stab
is
me, daddy.
Good. Yes,
exactly.
Okay, yeah, so Carl does end up waking up in the further. He immediately meets real Josh, and as a result, they go on their journey to try to figure out what the fuck is going on. This is where time starts to get messy. So we see the outside of the house.
From the first movie, right? Because we're not in this house again.
No, yeah, it's their original house that we thought was possessed. So Josh in the further goes and bangs on the door, and that's when, if you have not seen the original Insidious in a while, you're like, wait, what is happening? Because why are Josh and Renee suddenly just in bed? Like, Renee isn't freaked out that her husband forgot the original song she wrote. Like, what's going on?
But this is when, though, that collective moment where the audience realizes, this is the first movie!
Exactly. Yeah, so we get these scenes. I'm curious, do you folks think that they just refilm these, or did they just shoot new footage and insert it into the first film?
I thought it was footage from the first film,
Yeah.
or maybe cut. Yeah, I thought so. I don't think it was reshot.
But yeah, this is the big reveal that like
wait.
Brother Josh was involved in that sequence in the first film. Ah!
So wait, then it is kind of like Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2.
Just a couple moments. It's not 30 minutes.
I don't know. I really liked the way that they tied it back into the first one. Yeah,
I loved it. I thought it was so clever.
Yeah, I think this is the most clever thing the movie does. And again, I know I'm like shitting on this movie a lot. This is still a 3 out of 5 movie for me. I like this movie. I just have a lot of problems
Just
with
say you hate it. Just say it.
Let it be known. I said I liked it. You said you hated it.
Yeah, like in the rankings of like worst horror films ever made, it's Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, and then Insidious. That's what we figured out. So Josh in the further ends up getting attacked by Parker Crane, and he is saved by the one and only Elise. She's got this kind of light lantern that apparently scares Parker Crane away through a window. Okay.
My favorite thing about the Insidious film is actually Joseph Bashara's score. I love the use of strings here, but I love when Elise shows up and like is like, go to hell or whatever the hell she says. We get this like really swelling of like cheesy hero music. I thought that was
She's
really
the
fun.
fucking savior in this movie. It's amazing.
It's just so silly.
Yeah, maybe that's because what it was signaling. It gives me a signal of like something from like The Hobbit or like Dungeons and Dragons or something. Like she shows up and banishes the undead with her holy symbol, like that, throw them out the window.
Well, she does have that lantern, but don't forget she has that deadly crib as an offhand weapon.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
So she ends up basically dumping this mound of exposition about how we can get out of this situation. So apparently Josh has to distract Michelle Crane so that he can take possession of his body back. But in order to distract her, he has to find her house. And it's like, cool. We're just going to pretend that that makes sense, or, you know, we're not going to question how you figured any of that out. But yes, okay, so that's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So further, Josh ends up asking his younger self from the 1986 videotape, and this is why young Josh pointed randomly.
Also, in case you didn't get it, Lin Shaye's like, so that's what that was about.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wink.
For the dumb audience members, or maybe someone who had to go pee, this is what you missed.
Let me explain it to you. The mom lives downstairs. She's been a roommate the whole time. She's in the basement.
And that's an example of like the over-explaining with some things, but then choosing to completely, you know, not address others. Just, strange.
And again, that's something the first movie does, but because all of the things it's like, over-explaining are like brand new concepts, it works for me there. Whereas with this movie, like, y'all, we already know we're in play here.
Yeah, like we're already in the further, which means we're into the last act of this movie.
The creators probably read the Reddit and were like, God, they are seriously didn't get that? This time we're going to really go into it and explain it like they are 5.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are still cross-cutting between now the further and the real world. So possessed Josh is attacking Renee and Lorraine. We have this chase sequence around the house. This is where we get the kettle.
This is great. All of this, I think, is fucking great. I am living for these chases.
Definitely tense, definitely scary moments, and
Yeah, it almost feels like a slasher movie, right? Like sub out Josh and put in Ghostface, and all of a sudden we've got Rose Byrne as a final girl in a stab movie.
Oh, totally. Yeah, very easily. Until it's the point where we're like, wait, Mom, I got this. I'm just going to go take a nap under the stairs over there. I'll be right back.
God.
Okay, but then it really is full on The Shining, though. We're just replacing an axe with a fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what does he do? You're like, he's going to sleep. I'm like, huh? How? What are you talking about?
He's such a good napper. The sound doesn't bother him at all. He can just sleep anywhere. Like, Dad's trying to break in and murder us? No, he's just going to take a quick 5.
Well, survival always makes me tired. And when I'm tired, I like to just sleep under the stairs.
But again, that's the thing with the time for the movies. Oh, hey, this is like the next day or a day or two later. He's become an expert astral projector in his time since the first movie.
He knows what he needs to do. He's got this telephone can. Mom's going to keep him grounded. And off he goes into the further. He's going to rescue Dad. No complications, seemingly. It's kind of bizarre, eh?
That's fine. I mean, yeah.
So, I do like the moment where we see Josh moving through the further and he gets to interact with the victims of Parker Crane. I'm surprised that there isn't really a scare here, though. Like, I kept waiting for Mother to show up, and she never does.
Well, she does eventually when he pulls off a sheet, but, like, just not here.
Right. Yeah.
It's fine.
It's a memorable sequence. It didn't have a kind of stinger or a scare moment like I thought it was going to.
That's kind of the thing, though, because this is, again, we're redoing the end of the first movie with Patrick Wilson going around the further. But when he was interacting with him in that first movie, it's like, oh, like he's looking at like a trio of ghosts sitting on the couch, and then all of a sudden they're standing behind him and they smile in the next frame, and it's like,
yeah,
maybe they wanted to try to avoid repeating themselves, even though the whole climax is kind of a repeat of itself.
Repeat most of it, but not the last 2%. We need to go for some originality.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, Dalton ends up finding them in time. So as possessed Josh breaks down the door in the real world, this is when Elise begins beating the absolute shit out of Michelle Crane with a rocking chair. And apparently that casts her out. So Josh is back in his body in the real world just in time. And so everybody's kind of safe. Elise has saved the day in the further, and the family is reunited. I do love that it takes 2 or 3 instances where Josh is like, no, Renee, it's actually me. I swear, I know I just tried to kill you, but it's actually really me now.
Well, okay, one thing I want to ask you all, because I don't know if it was confusing to you. So Lin Shaye hits her with, Elise hits her with the crib.
Mm-hmm.
Or a rocking chair, whatever.
The rocking chair,
Sorry,
yeah.
whichever, yes.
Banging her, hitting her like 3 times. And they, the way the shot is, it's like the drag queen falls out and it falls into the,
Right.
I thought that was confusing.
It's absolutely, because you see that we are hitting the mother. We're hitting Michelle Crane, and that is having an impact on real world Josh, who we know is possessed. But then when Elise is like victorious in driving the entity out, we see it's the bride in black. So we're like, wait, so Parker Crane was the one who was possessing Josh, but apparently beating the mother drives him out. Like, what?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, though, is that we're supposed to buy into the fact that Parker is so, like, tied to his mother that defeating her does defeat Parker.
Sure.
But I guess it was the visual of her bringing the like rocking horse down, and then, Parker falls out, like goes, I don't know, I thought there was something weird about that. I was
it's
like, wait.
really confusing. Like, visually, it doesn't work.
Yeah, because the mom falls down and then he falls, it seems like he's falling out of her, not out of Josh, and you're like, wait, what? And so I'm like, well, who was it the whole time? It kind of leaves a little bit of doubt.
Well, then that makes me backtrack what I said earlier. I thought I created that really interesting idea of like how the mother character was possessing Josh and directing him and kind of gaslighting all the other like real world women, right? Through the man skin. But is it really kind of once removed where mom's got such a grip on her son, who she's forcing into like this new gender, that he's doing the possession, but basically like a marionette for mom. Like she's really pulling all the strings and he does exactly what she says, exactly how she says it, so that effectively she's in control, but through him only.
Which is very Dead Silence, actually.
Oh, shit. Yeah. They're actually, these movies actually do have a lot of holdover, at least stylistically speaking, of like the Dead Silence look and vibe.
So yeah, basically, we have this hilarious comedic stinger where Tucker breaks in and he's going to save the day. Ha ha, the action's already over. And then we end the film with this Elise spin-off prequel setup where she's still kicking around. She's helping Specs and Tucker. And I mean, I think it's interesting that we're doing possession things with other characters. So we meet this character, Allison, who is played by Danae Rodriguez, that maybe sets something up. I was just more like, hey, baby fucking Jenna Ortega is in something again.
I pointed at the television. That's Jenna Ortega.
I could not believe it. I for sure thought, like, Joe, not every little girl with dark hair is Jenna Ortega. But no, lo and behold, it actually is.
It actually is. She gets everything. And that's all I'm going to say.
Well, because she looks exactly the same age as she does when she does You, but I was like, no. The timeline does not add up at all.
No, because she would have started. She looks the same as she did in Jane the Virgin when she's playing Little Jane. She very much looks like the Jenna Ortega we know now in You.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I would argue she always looks exactly like herself, just slightly older, but
I will say so. Drac and Swan, have y'all seen the 3rd and 4th films in this franchise?
Yes, but I don't really remember much about them.
I don't remember them now, but I do remember liking them, and I do remember that Lynn was definitely the star of them.
Oh, for sure. I think it's always a thing for me where it's like, so because 3 and 4 are prequels, this is the end of the continuity of this franchise until, of course, The Red Door comes out. Is it this week? Is it this week that's coming out? Yeah. So I guess I always kind of like, oh, you're setting up this cool like idea of a spinoff with Ghost Elise helping human Tucker and Specs.
Yes.
And then we don't do anything with that. We just decided to go into prequel land.
Yeah.
It's a cool idea. Untapped now, too.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how this new film continues the mythology or kind of has to disregard portions of it. I just really hope that we don't like, wouldn't it be funny if we open this new movie and it's just like 15 minutes of previously on Insidious 1 and Insidious Chapter 2?
I bet you it will. I bet you that it will definitely re-reference it in the same way that this one did. They'll probably find some crafty ways to sort of weave it throughout, I bet.
I hope so.
So, okay, this is, because I was rewatching the second one today and I was like, Because I'm really excited for the new one because I'm excited to see Rose Byrne in a horror movie again, but she's clearly very much not the focus of that sequel.
No. It's going to be this kid and his shitty hair.
Okay, but here's the thing. Rose Byrne shows up like 3 times in the trailer for Insidious: The Red Door.
Mm-hmm. Those are all 3 of her scenes.
One of the but one of the shots is like a zoom in of her on the ground screaming. It is literally the exact same shot from Insidious Chapter 2 when he's about to kill Dalton while he's sleeping. So I was like, oh, okay, so 2 of the 3 shots of of Rose Byrne in this trailer, one of them is just a lift from the second movie.
It was so effective the first time, we did it again.
I bet you there'll be lots of like referencing the first 2. I'm excited to see it now.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And now we're fresh, like we're ready for it because we just rewatched them.
And Patrick Wilson directed it, so it's like we get to see his directorial debut.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting. Yeah, I kind of want to. This is what I always do. This is how we got stuck watching Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 through 5. I'm gonna want to watch the rest of them now to catch up.
We'll power
before we go.
Do it.
For sure.
3 has Dermot Mulroney in it, so you cannot go wrong there.
You know what I'm getting? I just remember. I remember key fingers. I remember like an old man with like a trench coat in like an attic or something. Does he have a
guys?
No. Or what's that other one with the ball? What's it called?
Phantasm.
Phantasm.
Oh,
yeah.
Phantasm. I was like, the Changeling?
Changeling.
I was like,
awesome.
a man in a trench coat? No, that's just the porn you've been watching.
No, that's the flasher who lives next door.
Right.
Okay, well, that is Insidious Chapter 2. Drac and Swan as the guests of honor. Any final thoughts on this film before we close out?
My final thought is, I really like it. I do. Like it definitely has some. It doesn't explain a lot, but there's some imagery that I think is really startling. It definitely has scary moments, and I love the camp of it. So yeah, I'm into it. I give it 2 claws up.
Yeah, my thoughts are I know it may not be as celebrated or as appreciated as the original, but as I was watching, I got reminded how much I liked it back when I first saw it, and it was a great rewatch. And I think that the way that they do their title treatment when the words Insidious come up and that operatic like, I'm like, oh, I react to it every time. I'm like that. Oh, I just love it.
So good.
Drama. The high drama is too good.
So good. No, I mean, again, I like this movie. I would like it more if I didn't love the first movie as much as I do. But yeah, I think it's the camp factor that I really appreciate in this. I appreciate how willing this movie is to just be ridiculous. But it is grounded in a way. It's just not grounded like that first movie is.
Yeah. It's grounded in that relationship drama. Yeah.
And it starts to kind of establish Lin Shaye really as like she's here to stay, right? Which is cool.
Yeah, if nothing else, it confirms that Lin Shaye is a huge fucking draw, and we did her dirty by killing her off in the first film, so good on them for recognizing that.
Agreed.
I like this movie. I don't think it's as strong as that first film, but it's often a case of slightly diminishing returns when you talk about a sequel compared to the original film. So it's not like this is new territory for horror fans. I think that this is doing some interesting things. I wish it was a touch more original. Obviously the problematic aspect is not good. I'd love to say, well, it's 2013. We didn't know as well, but
yeah.
But overall, you know what? This is a really fun double bill. Like if people just want to settle in for a good time, you can do a lot worse than Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2.
Yeah, you could do Insidious: The Last Key.
Rude.
I'm just kidding. That's a solid 2.5. That's a solid 2.5. All right. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, Drac and Swan, first of all, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this with us.
Yes.
But let everyone know, what do you got coming up?
So we are working on the next season of the show, so that's exciting, and that will be coming out later in the fall this year. We're going to be going to UK to continue our Titans tour. Yes, we're the type of people that are still touring with the last season while filming the next season.
There's some really fun appearances at some horror conventions too, like around the country.
Oh yeah,
so we'll be busy this summer.
We have we're actually doing Midsummer Scream, and we're erecting one of our sets on the main floor there, and doing a lot of meet and greets with the former winners of the show. We're going to do a big panel there. That's going to be exciting. And then around Halloween this year, we're actually touring with our two-headed one-woman show, so it's just a Boulet Brothers only Halloween tour that we're doing
Oh, fun.
in the U.S. Yeah.
And let me say thank you for having us, because this was really fun. This was like a really I enjoyed just sitting down and kind of like at a knitting circle and talking over everything Insidious 2. It was a really good time.
Yes.
Well, yes, the feeling is very mutual, and we are excited to have y'all back at some point.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, if you want to get in touch with us, everyone, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. Go to our YouTube channel to check out our interviews with various horror filmmakers, and tune in once a month to hear about our most anticipated horror films for that month. If you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook HorrorQueers group. If you love us, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you would like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/horrorqueers and sign up. If you sign up now, you'll get, almost 250 hours of extra content, Joe. This month, as we've repeatedly said, we are continuing our journey into the further with episodes on the whole Insidious franchise, plus Patrick Wilson's sequel, The Insidious The Red Door. We are also double dipping in another franchise, Bird Box, talking about Bird Box Barcelona, and we, of course, have an audio commentary on the original Sandra Bullock film.
Right.
And then if you don't like franchises, then we have also got an episode on Marianne director Samuel Bowden's new film Cobweb, starring Lizzie Kaplan and Anthony Starr.
Yeah, some good stuff.
Yeah. But let everyone know, Joe, what are we covering next week?
All right, well, we have trashed him numerous times throughout this recording, so apologies to Adam Robitel, because we are covering his sequel next week when we touch base with Escape Room 2, Tournament of Champions.
Heads up, everyone, in case you don't know, there are 2 versions of this movie, and they are very different versions of this movie. We will be covering both of them.
Yeah, spoiler alert, if you can get your hands on the extended edition, it is the better version.
It is, because it has, what's-her-face, Orphan Girl.
Isabel Furman?
Yeah, that one. Anyway, okay. Well, until next week, everyone, we can cross out Insidious Chapter 2.
Indeed. And cross out Horror Queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.